Hi class, for this week's learning outcome, I chose to differentiate between primitive and postural reflexes. So in this chapter, we learned about the different reflexes that infants exhibit um, after birth, a couple months following birth, and maybe even up to a year, and then some after birth. So primitive reflexes are more like survival instincts for an infant. In the textbooks, the table 7.1 shows you a big list of primitive and postural reflexes, and it even shows you the expected duration of these reflexes. So, for the primitive reflexes, there's things like the Moro, startle, stretch, sucking reflex. The sucking reflex, for example, is when you stimulate touch on the infant's hard palate, like in their mouth or around their mouth. They will instinctively start a sucking motion, which is more like a survival thing to gain nutrients. This is how the infant knows to gain nutrients from its mother. Same thing with the palmar reflex. If you take an infant's hand and you touch right here, they'll immediately grasp, which is another survival reflex to hold on to things. So primitive reflexes are a lot more instinctual. Unlike the postural reflexes, they're more like precursors to voluntary movement. So for the postural reflexes, these are like the labyrinthine riding reflex, the pull-up reflex, neck riding. Those are just a couple examples. Crawling and swimming as well, and stepping. These are just reflexes that happen, but eventually they start to kind of fade away, and they show up as voluntary movement rather than just a reflex. The labyrinthine riding, for example, is when you pick up an infant and they're kind of like sitting upright. Um, and you tilt them to the side, they're gonna want to stay upright. So they start to move their body, like you could move their torso and their body will like try to keep themselves upright. Um, and then in terms of like crawling, like and steps and all that, those eventually fade away into actual movements that the infant will voluntarily do. But that usually isn't like fading away until maybe what looks like 4 months after birth. Yeah, and then another thing is if some primitive reflexes are still showing after like maybe 12 months or the expected time to be seen, it could show that there's like developmental delays in the child's like neurological system, their reflexes and stuff. But yeah, that is the difference between primitive and postural reflexes.